We all good.
All right, all right. So again, welcome everybody to the Black Table Talk, Black Burnout. Before we lay the ground rules, I want to invite our panelists to give a brief introduction about yourself. How did you get into your business? And then, fun fact, what is one thing that you do for self-care? So, Tiffany.
Okay. Hey y'all, my name is Tiffany Tate. My business is called Career Maven, and largely I focus on career professional development for ambitious women. So career coaching, executive coaching, that kind of thing. And I also partner with companies for training and development initiatives to help reimagine what the workplace looks and feels like for all people. One thing I do for self-care, I have a Black therapist.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Brandon Raleigh. I'm the founder of ExpressMed, a transportation company dedicated to clients who are wheelchair bound, stretcher bound, getting them to and from doctor's appointments, and just fulfilling that need in the community. And so one thing I do, I need to look externally more, but one thing I do now internally is to do mindfulness meditation exercises where I basically take a look at an analysis of myself, how I feel throughout the day. If I'm stressed, I just kind of close my eyes, take a few minutes to breathe, feel myself, calm myself down, and just recenter myself so that I can continue throughout the day.
I'm Ashley Hardesty Armstrong. I'm a chef, I'm a product developer, also the brand curator for Forsyth Seafood Market and Cafe, and one of the co-owners, along with my mother, who's the legacy owner. Something I do let me talk about my business first, hold on. So we are a fresh market that sources 20 to 28 different types of wild-caught seafood from the Outer Banks of North Carolina, and we're two entities, and our other entity is a Southern Fried Calabash seafood restaurant. It seats about 100 people who've been in the community this year, 40 years, which is gonna be crazy. My parents founded it, and then I came in as one of the co-owners 11 years ago. One of the things that I do for I guess like my mental health and centering myself is I also have a Black therapist that I see weekly. What else do I do? I do spa days. I love that, and I travel.
Yes, we're traveling.
Yeah.
All right, y'all doing good with the ums and ahs. All right, so thank you, panelists, for introducing yourselves. Again, this is going to be a very organic conversation that we'll be having, that will talk about the intersection of mental health, as well as Black entrepreneurship in their individual businesses, as well as from a greater standpoint. Just to give some housekeeping items, we may have conversations about suicidal ideation or other mental health disorders or disparities that happen. So if you need to step out from the room to catch a breath, please do so at your own convenience. We want to make sure that we're creating a safe but a courageous space. But if you have to step out from having for some of the things that may trigger you, that is more than welcome as well. We'll be having questions at the end that you can ask for the panelists when we are done with the conversation between all four of us. So I hope you enjoyed it. All right. So jumping in, one of the things that Faye talked about was economic trauma within the Black community, particularly with Black business owners, and some of the things that we are focusing on to try to rectify that, right? And some of that is external forces, but I want to bring it back internally from the conversations that we've had on the panel. One of the things that is told to young Black kids and even Black business owners is you have to work twice as hard to achieve. And even though that may have some truth and validity to it, there's an omission of information from that says because of institutional racism, because of like what Faye talked about, power, money, and all that, but to the child, that part is omitted, and they just hear you have to work twice as hard. That already builds an inferiority complex into the Black child, so when they go to do different things, they have to live in this exceptionalism, right? So in saying that to my panelists, anybody can start. When you hear that phrase, you you have to work twice as hard. What feelings does that emit for you? Everybody have one?
I know. So I think I can speak from a standpoint of hearing that phrase multiple times, and you know, I have parents who are from a different generation, and so learning from more seasoned parents and hearing that sort of thing and understanding the experiences they went through, where they were a part of segregation, and so being twice as focused, being so acutely focused on the things that you have to do, and then not only that, building relationships, and then thinking about how people look at you. You know, all of that is kind of the twice as hard method. However, or the thought of having to work twice as hard. And so, in a sense, it's true because you have to overcome your self-doubt, but then you feel like you also have to overcome external forces who have their perspective of who they think you are. I know when, you know, I look at myself now and I'm like, I have braids and I'm a male, and that's something that was never a part of who I was before this. And having parents of an older generation, they like to keep it clean cut, and so it's like, make it as easy as possible. Go to a PWI, you know, those sorts of things that you hear about. I'll leave it there so I can allow some others to respond to that later.
I just want to piggyback on the PWI. That's the thing that like kind of stood out to me, because I wanted to go to HBCU my entire life, and I'm like, okay, I feel like I have to kind of like, you know, go to a PWI instead. And people that ask me, I'm like, that's like one of my worst regrets of like not growing up in a family of people that mostly went to HBCUs, and I didn't get to have that, you know, experience personally, but we went to all the homecomings. We still experience GHO to this day. My family still comes to town for that, and it's kind of like, that's one of the things that I really regret, and that's, I guess that's some of the trauma that comes from having to kind of work and appear a certain way in the world. Being a public business, I feel like there's like this little thing in the back of my head often of like, okay, if certain people come in here, we have to make sure, you know, this is right and that's right, and this has to be spotless, and then make sure they're getting like correct service and all of that. So I always feel like it's the twice as hard thing for me there as being like a public business and a public figure too.
Because people at McDonald's do whatever they want.
Exactly. Exactly.
I think, I don't know if this is working, but I think, can y'all hear me in the back? Okay, cool, loud. So I think what comes to
There's some seats up front for them.
I know that's right.
There's two things that come to mind for me. The first is I did attend a PWI twice, and very proud of that. Wouldn't trade it. I was a first generation college student, and so there are some things about my undergraduate experience that I owe a great credit to because it kicked my butt. But I also found a community of people there that are still my A1s to this day. And I think as a first generation college student specifically, that experience seeded a lot of what I'm doing now. But the other thing that comes to mind is that I call it the black tax, it's an accelerator for many of us, because if you are used to harnessing this internalized trauma to do really good work, it can sometimes accelerate you at work or in your business or whatever, but it's also a curse. And I'm saying that as a person who has a full-time job and has had a full-time job the entire time I've started building my company. And for the foreseeable future, that's my plan, because I was an accidental entrepreneur in many ways, but it's also really hard when you're doing good work at your job and doing good work in your company. And there aren't any performance complaints, but as a Black woman, I have also experienced people asking questions about, well, how are you able to do that and this? Because I couldn't do that. Or you're a mom too, like how do you do all that stuff? Like, what are you smoking, sis? And so I think the idea that you can accelerate and propel yourself and get really big rewards for the twice as hard mantra is true and has been true, but it's also exhausting. And it can be very lonely because there is a trade-off to working that hard. Because time is a finite resource. So
That's a good set. I love that movie. So a thing that I heard from all three of you is this idea that we are consistently, W.E.B. Du Bois said, the soul of that place, like, I'm gonna butcher it, you know it. Have that double consciousness, right? Like how we see ourselves in the world and how the world perceives us. And I think sometimes as Black people, and we're gonna overlay this with business, there's this exceptional factor that you just highlighted where we want to work as hard to have everything tight, but when does that allow us to be soft?
Yeah.
When does it allow us to be rest, like to have rest? Like when does it allow us to turn off? And I think as I'm listening to kind of the conversation, would love for y'all to dive deep about, we're mindful of that dynamic. How do we combat that narrative that we are allowed to not always be exceptional?
Yeah.
How does that show up in your business practices or the way that you run your business?
I love that, Harrison.
We can say it for a moment.
Well, I think redefining what exceptional looks like, because for a long time I thought exceptional meant I had to do everything. No, it's not the best use of my intellectual capital to do everything. But it took a long time for me to feel comfortable looking for support or hiring support, or and that takes time and money. But it also shows up in how I've shifted my lens at work, because we know statistically women and women of color are going to pick up more administrative tasks. Administrative tasks do not get you promotions, no matter how good you are at them. And that stuff is what my business is built around, but it has also forced me to change the way I show up in spaces. And I think of a mentor, earlier in my career, I was in a meeting, and I don't like a meeting that's a waste of time. Don't invite me. But I was in this meeting and I saw it going off the rails. I was like, what's the project plan? What are we gonna do? But that wasn't my role in that meeting. And the person pulled me aside after and said, I know why you were doing that and asking those questions and wanting to push, but you will always be the person doing that. And if it's not your role to do that in the room, you need to be mindful of that. And that changed me immediately. So I use that story to say that we really have to redefine what exceptional looks like and what it means and how we define value, because my labor and muling me, which I have experienced at work, no thanks. Get somebody else.
Yeah, I want you to repeat that question one more time.
Oh, I gotta remember it. So how do you combat this idea of exceptionalism in your business, right? So like, when do you allow yourself to be soft, not in the context of like, well, also if you have an emotional breakdown, like happens, but like, how do you give yourself that space to experience that softness, or I don't have to be at that level 100% of the time, all the time?
So, to speak transparently, I'm still working on that. I've only been working with our company for almost 11 years now, and I am probably one of the youngest bosses that a lot of my employees have ever had. So that's a new experience for a lot of people that come into a business, as well as a Black women-led and owned business. So that's also different for a lot of people. So I'm still working on the tools that I need. Therapy's definitely pushing me through with that, and it kind of helps me to kind of like look in and say, okay, I can be this specific thing, being a woman in a mostly male dominant industry like food service, and just most chefs that I know are not Black, and they are men, they aren't women for the most part. And it's really hard for me to kind of like be that softer person because of that, because I've got to, like you said, work 10 times as harder and appear a certain way, make sure I got all my ducks in a line, which also brings up the thought of like, okay, I need to go back and, I went back to culinary school, because I didn't even want to do anything with food. So I'm still like kind of gathering those tools for what that looks like, making sure that I'm not but having specific relationship with, like communicative relationship with people in my business the same way I do with people in my personal life, because like I do come off hard in that way, which is really weird if you're always kind of like, all right, I'm so focused, I'm so business minded, like, ooh, like she's real stern. It's like, no, I'm just kind of like super professional. But then like when I go home or like when I'm with my family, it's kind of like, you gotta turn it off. So I'm still working on that to be completely transparent. And definitely like some of those like tools we were talking about, like travel and my spa days, all those things are kind of helping me along the way.
And I think for me, I'm coming from a different perspective. So I'm still in the process of becoming fully operational. So these two ladies, you know, they've had the time and experience to touch so many facets of their business and have to be exceptional. I haven't gotten to that point yet, so I'm still, every day and every minute has to be productive for me. But I can say that in that, I've fallen victim to neglecting my wife as a priority on some days, you know, work, all sorts of different things. So when I think about exceptional, I'm still in the mindset of I have to get to a point where I can call myself exceptional before I can allow myself to, you know, grace.
Brother, you are exceptional.
Well, thank you. And so I actually had a conversation with my mom, who was sitting beside my way, just last week. And you know, I told her, I was like, you know, I thought that I would be further along than where I am right now. I started a year ago, and so, you know, planning and the things that you have to do up front to get a business actually going. And she was like, well, you know, you look back like you've come a long way. So you have to think about where you've come from and the steps and strides that you've taken to get to where you are. And so that allows me to give myself some grace at certain times. Yeah.
You don't charge your phone when it dies, right? You charge it before it dies.
There you go. You're right.
So
Very true.
in each of your journeys, you talked about resiliency, whether it's starting your business, whether it's maintaining the family legacy, or for you, really building it, right? So in that resiliency, what has allowed you to persevere through that? Because in that, there's, like the title says, the burnout happens, where if you're consistently fighting, we're not robots. Like, like some days our 100 is 50%. What do you do to refill your cup in those spaces of burnout?
I step away. That happened to me today. Thursdays are always my longest days. So I'm a full-time entrepreneur. So my day starts at 10 and I'm going home in the car at 10 p.m. So I'm at the business basically almost every day. And I started out, especially with COVID in 2020, I kind of felt like, okay, every day it's a fight. We stayed open the entire time. We were one of the only restaurants in Winston-Salem in the Triad area that was open. So we were crazy. It was very crazy, a very crazy time. So every day I'm there, you know, from open to close. And doing that for 2 years, it definitely wore me out. And I realized I'm not a robot. So I have stepped back and I've kind of like put some parameters on like what my schedule is and creating more like social time, you know, with like my friends. Cause like looking back, I'm like, I lost a lot of time like with my family and my friends and miss birthday parties. And, you know, people will call me, are you still coming to this? I'm like, oh, I can't come. And then I look up and I'm like, I'm just here at a restaurant, or I'm just here, you know, talking with customers and my employees, and I'm missing like, you know, key moments with my friends and my family. So, yeah, still working on that part too.
It's a journey. I don't even know. I'm still working on it too, because like I said, I accidentally became an entrepreneur, so it's vibes. But what comes to mind is I spent 2020 to the end of 2022 being very reactive. And what I mean by that is, you know, nobody was doing anything in 2020, and then George Floyd was murdered, and then everybody and their mama was like, we keep hiring the same trainers. Hey girl, what do you do? So I saw a boom in my business. And I was like, oh, okay, this is the thing that I probably should focus on some. And I had the space to focus on it because a lot of the stuff I was doing was halted. But I also went through a challenging divorce during the pandemic. I'm the mom of a now 7-year-old. So for a 2-year window, I was working every Saturday and part of Sunday because I was like, I want to do this. I have to do this. And I had my job and I'm parenting and we just don't know what's happening in the world. And I'm really proud of what I built during that time. But at the end of that 2 years, I was done, like maxed out. Like clients are great, you know, I'm helping people, that's all fun, I'm making some money. But my daughter thought that work was more important than her. And she could name that. Like she could say like, oh, you have another meeting? Can I go do this thing? You know, she now games it, but for a period of time, it was very clear to me and it was hard to explain to her because her father is an educator, he's very engaged, but his work looks different because he just does that thing. And so in her mind, she's like, well, I don't understand why you're doing this because people don't have to do this. And there were a few other people in my family who were like, said some interesting things. I think they meant well, but what motherhood looked like to my mom and my family in their generation was very different. And so I say all that to say that I went from being reactive and responding to a market and responding to opportunity to being more strategic and thinking about what do I want my life to look like because I don't want to build another job. I don't know if I want to be a full-time entrepreneur, but I know what I don't want to do 40 hours a week. And so I'm fortunate that I have this space to sort of play around and continue to do things and slowly take on more help. But I've also, I hired a business coach during the pandemic because I didn't go to school to be a business owner. And I knew there were things I needed to learn and I needed some accountability and support. So I'm thankful that I'm in a different headspace now, but it was real interesting. Very y'all have no idea. I'm so grateful in some ways that we were virtual because it was a total mess behind the scenes. I had some cool opportunities. I did this pitch competition during the pandemic. I won it. But what people didn't see on the other side of the screen was my daughter stark naked, running around at 9 o'clock at night, and I was literally holding her off the camera because I was like, this whole thing going down. And she's here. I really want to talk to y'all about my business. And I have the video and I laugh at it because I'm holding my hand like this and people can't tell. Yeah, Shayla was there. I was like, yeah, and career management does, blah, 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 blah. And one of the judges was like, you just keep smiling so much. I'm so happy, but I cried every day for 6 months. I was doing a lot. Life was happening to all of us and to me.
Oh my gosh.
So, it was crazy. But I'm grateful for it because I know now that I can do anything. But I don't want to do it.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
good.
So I've had to be really real with myself in therapy and with people who I know and trust to say okay, since we're out here, we can't really take it back. The brand exists. I could quit, I guess, but I can't take back what I've created. Help me understand how to design something different that works for my life. And that means saying no to a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
That's good.
I'm gonna just get ready to cry then. That's what I prepare myself to cry a couple of days out of the week.
No, I was crying because I was going through a divorce, not my business.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah, and also crying because I'm in a service-based business and clients during a pandemic, you're talking to them about work. People are getting laid off.
Right.
I was crying with them. I'm like, we just gonna cry.
That's tough.
It's tough. There are parts of business that I think y'all know, but a lot of other people don't understand. It's lonely. There are hard days and really great days. Yeah, every day it's highs and lows. And I'm not a high low. I'm just kind of chill. I'm very
Mellow.
I'm mellow. Business is not mellow.
It's not.
It's not. And
I'm sorry, I was gonna add to that.
Yeah.
Like a personal experience for me, you just have to push through every day. So we said, we're still experiencing life behind the scenes, but then go have your boo-hoo cry, and you gotta go out there and show up for people, because people are, we're responsible for people on the team, we have to make sure these people are able to pay their mortgages and rent, and all this stuff, and it's this sad reality of kind of forget about yourself in the moment to get business and get work done, but at an extent. But there's always a limit. I feel
Oh, y'all just dropped gems.
Yeah.
I'm trying to see which one I want to pick out. I'll tell this experience and then ask the question. One of my friends who are entrepreneurs we always reference back to 2019. And what I like about what each of y'all have talked about y'all experience is like humanize Black entrepreneurs. I think sometimes we think, oh, gotta get them on a panel, gotta speak, because they're like this shining light, but they're still human. Like human with emotions, human with trauma, human with pain. I think you humanize y'all experience. I will never forget, it was one of my friends, she was building her business and her sales dropped. Couldn't pay nobody, the debt collectors were coming and all of that. And we got on the phone and she was crying, like she kind of called me out the blue and she said, I want to commit suicide. And all I could do is just sit there and be a soft space. Because I can use all the words, it's gonna be okay and all that, but that's not her reality, right? Like, she's trying to figure out how she is gonna pay the light bills, and she's been eating hot dogs out of the Dollar Tree for the past week because she has no money, right? And I think it's important from a community standpoint, similar to what they were talking about with like that economic, that healing, that ecosystem healing. It does take a community to surround entrepreneurs because at the end of the day, they're building and creating something that is new, but they are still a human that is trying to do it. And what can we equip to allow them to be a soft space? Or this one gentleman said this, and I'll never forget it, how do we bring friction out of their life so they don't have to be resilient? And think about those things, but kind of segueing, both Ashley and Tiffany made an interesting point about employees and working with people, and where you're probably gonna experience this as well, so I'd love to get your perspective. How do you process that secondhand trauma from your employees?
Oh my
When
God.
things are hitting, I'm not gonna curse, I'm good. When things are hitting the wall for them, like whether we were just talking earlier, they get laid off, they are going through a divorce, someone died in their family. How do you process that when you were tired, trying to run the business and maintain, but still creating space for them as their CEO, as their manager? And then Brandon, would love to get your perspective in your experience on how have you mitigated that, whether it's been in your professional career or you even building your business with that?
I make sure I have, a community to talk to. I keep bringing up the therapist thing. Therapy really changed my life like 4 years ago. I thought it was so stupid. I felt like looking back, my father passed away 10 years ago, and that's when I came in as one of the co-owners with my mother working in the business. And I was like, oh, it'll be fine. We literally kept the business open while my dad was like in hospice the entire time. We had his funeral, we closed for like 2 days because we had 2 funerals. They're not from here, so we had a funeral here and back home, which is like 5 hours away in Beaufort, North Carolina at the beach. So we didn't really get any downtime or anything, but therapy really changed my life. Looking back on that, I'm like, I should have had time to heal from that instead of coming and jumping back into work. So definitely having therapy and someone to talk to, and other people in my community, like my spouse, my really close friends. Like you said, like the entrepreneurial life is really lonely, so only certain people get it. Some people, I'm really bad about texting back sometimes, and some people can't handle that, in certain friend groups. Like, I have a friend, she's busy, she knows I'm busy, and some days we go back and text back and forth like days apart, like 4 days later, oh, I forgot to text you back, this happened, oh, I know you're busy, just grace. So just having a community with someone to talk to. Don't want to share too many trauma stories, but we deal with a lot of people on a daily basis with just like guests in the restaurant and the fresh market and just the people on our team. And we have seen and heard everything under the sun, especially in the food industry: substance abuse, economic woes, family death, family murders. It's like unending every day. And even today I had to step away because I was like, you know what? I just feel like everybody needs me. That's a thing too. Just everybody needs something from you. Can you help me with this? Someone wants to have an email, wants you to reply to an email. Can you take this meeting, take this phone call? So definitely having like a community and talking, therapy, those toolkits, that starter kit, my spa days, and all the other things that make me super happy. Getting sun, because people don't understand. I like to think that like human beings, like we're kind of like plants. We need water, we need sun. And sometimes like when I'm irritated, I'm like, okay, I need some water, and I need some sun, I need some food. So just having a community, someone to talk to for sure has really helped.
Yeah, I remember that sun, food, and water.
Yeah. And being, can I add more?
The wine almost came out.
And wine too, and the wine. And one more thing, like also having boundaries. Because I'm really, really nice, and we kind of have an open door policy, and I've realized I can't fix everybody's problems. I can listen to your problem, but I can't fix everybody's problems. Some days I'm like, I need a minute. Don't nobody come knock on my door. I lock the door, I put the sign on the door, like I turn my lights off, I leave, I spin the block, like sometimes some nights I drive to Pilot Mountain, like you just have to have your own me time, whatever your religion or your faith, like you have to have your meditation time, your prayer time. For me personally, the things that you consume, the things that you listen through your ear gate and your eye gate. My mom and I were talking about that today. If we experience a lot of things, you know, just in the public with drama from employees daily, but like I can't go home and watch. Like I like Real Housewives, but I can't go home and watch it all the time because that's a boundary for me. Like I can't, you know, consume that all the time. So definitely having boundaries. When people need me, when they need to speak to me, feeling like I need to like fix every issue in community, like I said repeatedly. Yeah.
Well, I guess I can add to that from the perspective of, so I have real estate, and so I have tenants. And so being a landlord with tenants is somewhat similar to, I can only imagine, somewhat similar to having employees. And so not having a property management company, me just doing it myself, I have tenants that are just calling my phone. And so I just had one, you know, I have a duplex, so one side just texted me last night at like 10 o'clock, and I'm like, bro, I'm not on the clock right now. This ain't a dire emergency. Do not hit my phone right now. So I've dealt with that. I've dealt with, you know, the other side where they're going through employment problems and they can't pay their rent on time, and they can't pay this month for one reason. They can't pay the next month for another reason. So I've gone through periods of 4 months where they didn't pay rent, and just some of that is empathizing with them because, you know, you have family issues, you do have circumstances that are out of your control, and so you know, you try to balance that with, okay, are they taking advantage of me now, or are they milking it? And at what point do I have to get back to the business part to say, all right, you still have this obligation, and you signed up for this part. So if you can't do that, then I can't do everything that I'm obligated to do either. So, you know, having a certain level of understanding, but again, to Ashley's point, making sure you have boundaries.
And it breaks your heart, but you gotta do what you gotta do.
Right.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's, you know, it's about what's in my best interest too.
Okay, I want to answer your question, but I also want to name that being early stage is still a stage, and you are an owner. You got tenants, and other things you do. And it's, I think, when I think about burnout and mental health for being owners, it's like all this, you were not intending, I think, to talk about or bring up comparison, but I think that's important to name for Black owners because, you know, people be out here on social media and everywhere, you're like, okay, that's great, show your cash, but you know, I think because information can happen so quickly, or because everybody became a TikTok star and all this stuff, it's like your lane is your lane, and whether it's early stage or middle or whatever, it's still valuable and valid. So I just want to name that, like,
Yeah,
you know,
for sure. I appreciate that too,
Yeah.
because that's one of the biggest things that I've had to overcome is like you're supposed to be in the room too.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, like truly believing in yourself and saying, all right, I'm not as far along, or I just haven't had the time to get those experiences, but you're supposed to be here too.
Yeah, and like entrepreneurship compounds. Like I'm not joking when I say accidentally. Like I was building my little website, and I remember my former partner was like, "When are you gonna be done with this hobby?" And I kind of laugh about it now because I'm like, well, I own my own trademark, so like, it's not a hobby, you know. like how do you deal with other people's stuff, I never want to be so air quote big, and I don't mean like financially, I mean like visible or whatever, however you want to define it, that I forget that people are humans first. And I'm really lucky that I have a full-time job and I work in HR leadership, and my focus at work is about people leaders. And I'm being pushed right now in my business. I don't like managing at all, actually. I help other people with it, but I don't like it. And the reason I don't like it is because I've always been a very scrappy self-starter type person. And I'm being kind of pushed in the business side to focus on relationship and coaching. That's hard stuff when people are dealing with hard stuff. And at work, my job is to design solutions to help people do that globally. So I don't think it's an accident that it's happening at the same time. But I just always want to remember that other people are human beings, and I work in manufacturing full time, and people forget that people are people, and they're dealing with like their hands getting cut off and all kinds of stuff. You know, it's like, that's real life for people. Yeah, like safety is a thing. You know, I don't have to deal with that in my personal business, but I was so used to being in a college educational environment where you have a captive audience, and for the most part, people are there to learn and do. But working in industry has also helped me see better for like the types of skills and acumen that I need to be a good business owner and a good person. And I want to be that first. And I believe that if I'm a good person first, and I deliver on what I said I was going to do, and I can empower other people to do that, I will make money. Like, you know, so I try to hold on to that because I have engaged with people that I thought were really cool online, and then I met them and I was like, you're not a good person. You know what I'm saying? And I don't want to be trash. I mean, I'm not trash.
You're not. So I think, again, y'all just said a lot of gems. I think a theme that I heard was like, being a business owner, being a Black business owner is not static. There's evolution that takes place in different stages, mean different things, right? As well as like, again, I think there's something for the audience to understand is like, social media is simply that, social media is a tool. And I think sometimes we have to remove ourselves, like, the perception is not the reality. And like how we have to sometimes sit with ourselves and saying, what is going on around in my ecosystem that I can control, and let me not focus on those other things outside. Which kind of leads into this next, one of our last questions before we open up to Q&A. This imposter syndrome that we kind of talked about, right? Where, not necessarily imposter syndrome, but thinking through like this perception versus reality. Like, I should be here, or I should not. I should promote my business, or I should not. I don't know how people would think about me if I pivot to do this X, Y, and Z. How have y'all worked through from y'all mental state of like pushing against the grain about what society should tell you should be doing for your business?
I think that is a tough thing to kind of reel back in because everything is just so accessible. You're talking about social media and connectivity to everybody and seeing and consuming all the things in so many different realms, and feeling like, okay, well, I should be there. If they can do that, I need to be there too. And just getting back to your center, getting back to yourself and saying, you know what, what's for me is meant for me. And who knows what struggles they had to go through to get to the point where they are. So, you know, all the glitz and the glamour might be 10 years of struggling, like, you know, struggling and working hard and 2 to 3 times as hard to get to the point where they are, where they become that overnight success. And I think that's what gets lost a lot of the times is that, you know, some people do become social media famous and that's an overnight thing, but some people become overnight phenoms after 15 years. So just remembering to keep those, what you see aligned with what you're doing, in a sense. And just remembering that other people have, their life is different from yours. And so again, what's meant for you is meant for you, what's meant for them is meant for them.
But for social specifically, I think a lot about how much I think people sometimes think you're sharing everything, but you're not. And there are certain things for me that I'm very intentional about. Like, I don't post my daughter's name. I don't ever share where I am in real time. I don't share things like, obviously our community is very small. I have, some mom friends who will share like, we're at blah, blah, blah school. I don't say anything about what school she goes to, and that kind of stuff, because I have experienced, some things that were unsettling, off social media. Quick story, in a former job, I had a friend who worked in the diversity space, and she sent me a screenshot one night, like this was during the pandemic. She was like, ain't this you? And I was like, what? Someone had created an email using one of my pictures off social. They registered for some events at Wake, and they were emailing back and forth with my friend who worked in the office at the time. And for 48 hours, like, it's scary because you're like, why would a person, like, what? So my immediate thought, like, I watched a lot of Law and Order, so I was like, okay. This is a lot of effort. It's not just the, spoof account. You made an email and you at my job, so for 48 hours, I was terrified that someone I know is doing this and I don't know why, or there's a coworker someplace. And at the time I worked in development, so we have, a CRM, and I'm like, if it's one of my coworkers, they can find my address. If they have access to, like, I was there for 48 hours, freaked out in my apartment at the time. And it ended up, being fine. They were able to figure out, it bounced off of someplace in Raleigh, but because there was no other incident, they were like, well, ma'am, you can file a police report, but they're not gonna do anything unless something happens. And that is when I was already intentional about how I show up online, but I changed my internal standards. And I share that story just to say, like, the internet is a wild place, but it's an open place, and so I think a lot about what we share, how much we share, what people expect of you. And I think Ashley said you gotta have boundaries. You have to have boundaries in the digital space too.
Yes.
With information and what you even respond to. I'm thankful that, like, I've had friends who've taken sabbaticals from social media because of the types of comments they get. I don't care about them people, but that incident was different to me. So I think figuring out what are your triggers, what are the things that don't feel good to you is really important because it's unique to you. And then making sure you're acting accordingly, and that your team members and peers are acting accordingly too. Like, I got to a point where I asked my friends, is it okay if I tag you? Because at some point, it's like, yes, it's my page, but are you okay with being in this?
Yeah.
I'm just gonna piggyback on what you said, like, definitely having boundaries in the social space, just being a public business. I run our social media account, so there are times when people send so many messages, like trying to place orders, and I'm like, that's not the way you go about that, or doing business, like any time of the day and the night, like we aren't actually running a business, or I could be in a meeting, or I could be on the highway delivering fish to another city, different things like that. So just having boundaries, and with having boundaries, sometimes creating roles for people so they can do some of those things for you. I just hired a social media manager and I love it. So, because there would be days where I was like, okay, I have to post a reel every single day. I posted a reel every single day for like 4 years. And it's just been like crazy, yeah. So, and working through that too in my mental, like, okay, if I don't post today, no one's gonna see what I have and no one's gonna come and support my business. And it's like, you're like, your brand, you working on your brand, you being a good person, like you said, and carrying that forward. People will support you because who you are and the quality of product that you have, not because you post on social media or, the comments that I get, I ignore them for the most part. I kind of like speak to the good things, and then the people that are super picky and just want to be nasty because they're nasty, just like, okay, great. But like, we're still going to be over here focused, and I think a lot of the times it is to kind of get you off your center too, because they want to see how you react. I actually was listening to a talk today, and in the talk, one of the quotes was, y'all heard the quote like, if the dog barks at the moon, nobody knows, but if the moon barks at the dog, then everyone notices. So I've kind of taken on that mentality of like, okay, I can't go back and forth with people. I can't, there will be times that I will be home, I'm supposed to be resting after a 12-hour workday on a food truck in another city, and I'm like, okay, I should respond to this person right now because they're rude, you know, but some of that stuff you just have to let go because people are watching you even when you don't realize it. But yeah.
I know this conversation can go on for days. I know there were some topics we didn't even touch on with this, but we want to open up to the floor for individuals to ask questions. Anything is on the table with boundaries. But you can ask the panelists, myself, any question that you have that you feel like you want to get off the chest or just want to learn about.
Before we recognize questions, first, thank you all so much for sharing your experience. And I know I told y'all you would hear from me again, so I'm sorry that I lied. I forgot that I was coming back up. But yes, thank you. But while we're getting questions, I just want to quickly note, we probably have enough time for maybe 1 to 2 questions, you all. We want to be respectful of everybody's time. And of course, you can stay afterwards and mix and mingle. But while we're getting the 1 or 2 questions, if you want your name to be pulled out of the raffle, because we're doing that right after, and you didn't get a chance to do that, I think Lily's gonna bring it in here with some pens, and you can make sure you just drop it in there if you want to be considered for the raffle. But yes, so I saw your hands for the question.
Okay, I just want to say thank you for this whole conversation. Like, it's amazing, and it's kind of emotional too, just to absorb it all. So I appreciate everything that you guys have brought to the table, all the little nuggets, as well as Faye. And my comment question is, although slavery has been gone, over for a long time, I like to call it residue. There's still a lot of residue left over. And not only are the systems responsible for that residue, but I think that within our own communities, we don't nurture each other.
Right.
And so how do we go about starting to, in our own communities, to nurture each other and reach over and lift each other up?
I think in business, support, like how are you supporting your team? How are you supporting your employees? And there's different ways of support. So, supporting them with some of my employees never having bank accounts, never owning property, getting them invested, and giving them resources to be a part of first-time homebuyer programs, and introducing them to certain people, exposing them to different foods, exposing them to different cultures, and different ways of learning and meeting. So I think support really is something that's definitely kind of changed the dynamic in my workspace, in my atmosphere.
I would say, like a simple thing, name it. I think sometimes we talk around the problem instead of talking directly to it. And I think also naming the fact that you may not be the person to help. I think sometimes we want to pour and say we want to help them and help. You're not a trained therapist. Like it may be better to say, hey, here are resources and grants to pay for therapy sessions, or I need to get you to a banker, because I think sometimes from a communal standpoint, we would say, let's help. And it's like, I'm not equipped to help you, but I can direct you to the resources that you can have. And then also doing that introspective work ourselves, right? Because I think sometimes when we talk, Black people are not monolithic, right? So Black people that are Black and disabled, Black and queer, Black and Hispanic, there are intersectionalities that sometimes, to the point that you're talking about, that we don't acknowledge within Black communities to say those experiences. I do not experience the world in the same way as a Black woman, where I should slap the hand of someone and say, oh, you're being sassy. That's a racial undertone that's being said to a Black woman. I may not experience that as a Black man, right? So it's also being hyper aware about those intersectionalities amongst our communities and holding each other accountable when we are demonizing or we are putting down the identities of that are just outside of Blackness.
Any other questions, or did any of the panelists want to respond to that? You have a question?
I do have a question that back into this one. So I think as Black entrepreneurs, Black business owners, we all experience family and friends who want that support, and it looks very specific to them and specific to your business.
Oh, that's what that means.
Let's call it
in
big
many
thing.
forms, in different forms. So I mean, how did you navigate that? I have my own business as well, audio engineering, and like I record lots of local artists. Some of them my friends, some of them are people who met me through friends, some of them is family. But how do you navigate like the relationship with business, supporting your community, and also supporting yourself?
Thank you, Tiana, that's what I was thinking. The price is right.
When that comes up, like if it has come up for you, do you have any stories for those moments?
Yeah, I think one, it depends on what it is. Like, are you willing to do anything? And if whatever the anything is you define, what's the value exchange? So like early on in my business, I would review a lot of resumes. I used to write resumes, do all this stuff. And so over time, people would be like, go to her. I'm like, don't come to me. I'm not available, But early on, I would barter because I didn't have enough capital to pay people to do stuff, at rate. So I would say, cool, I can help you with your resume or your LinkedIn. You have this skill, can you help me with this thing? And like build a frame around it. Later that turned into contracts. Like I don't do anything without a contract. And even with friends and family, I have to level set. I'm like, and I also have a personal amount of things I will do each quarter or year that I put in the pro bono or reduced rate because that's important to me. But beyond that, you have tough dialogue. Like, listen, dog, I got you, but let me send you this resource. Watch this, it's different because I don't do what you do, but I had somebody recently say, like, I have an interview coming up, and when are you available to meet with me? Whatever, blah, blah, and I was like, you paid me to do this, but we have this relationship, and I know I'm about to see you a whole lot, so I am willing to meet with you for 20 minutes, but watch these 2 videos I made first, and come with your questions. Like, I'm not gonna do a whole what I do for you pay, but I do want to help you because that's important. So I think part of it is naming what you have capacity to do or don't do. And if there is a value exchange you're willing to share, you can name that. And it's also okay to say no. I can't.
That's it.
You know what I mean? Like it sucks when it's friends and family. I know it sucks because they like put you on, but it's like, I can't. But here's the thing you might consider doing in the interim. I don't know.
I think it's that.
I feel like I need your card though.
Right. I got you. But it's just that question that she brought up is it's like this revolving door. When you do say no, or you are the person that has to have this conversation. I don't mind doing that. It's just like, well, you're not supporting me, or you're not supporting me. It becomes this thing.
Yeah, it becomes a thing. I'm also kind of low-key. I'm nice, but I'm like, no.
Yeah.
But I'll also be honest. Remember I said it's lonely. People who aren't doing a thing don't understand the mechanics of the thing. And sometimes we are being generous when we give somebody with honesty. Honestly, I want to help you, but I have too much on my plate. Low-key, the thing you're asking me to do takes like 20 hours or something.
Yeah.
Literally. So I can't take that on right now, but I'd be willing to, share a resource or something if you want to try to get started yourself, and I can coach you on it. Or I'm not doing none of that stuff because I can't go. I think in our community, the same way I would be real if I was talking to Do Power, I'm gonna be real to my friends and family too, because we also have to. Part of the reciprocity, I think, is honesty and soft education sometimes because people don't know. I think the real drain that they're putting on you sometimes when they make an ask because they don't understand everything that goes into what you do.
I think the other thing, and I'll take it from like the startup space, right? Like you go through a lot of pitch decks where they tell you customer discovery, right? So So like, it's also you articulating who your customer is. Your friend may not be your customer. And it's like, just because they're black doesn't mean that they're your customer. You want to be black, you want to be black focused and all that, but that doesn't mean that they are your customer, right? And it's like, even within the black ecosystem with that, again, black people are not a monolith. Your customers may drop $1,000 to $10,000. You may not be going after people who can drop $100. And like, you have to be honest with your business, where it's like, take the emotional aspect out of it, saying, for my core business competency, who is my customer segment? Can I name that? Is that, are they fitting into these personas? If they don't fit into persona, like Tiffany said, send them to another resource or refer them to a vendor that is in their price range. Like, you don't have to be the vendor. Like, there's another one that says, hey, I got a friend or a connect, and like, that's also building your network of relationships, because if you're sending them to different vendors, they had a good job, there may be other opportunities they send back to you. So it's like you building that network where like you divert kind of that stress level and say like, hey, I do X for this price. If you can't do that, great, let's find you another resource. That's not me. It just ended at that.
I want to piggyback off of Harrison real quick, and I know we got to go, and I had permission to speak also. Couple things. So I run a resource center out of Wilmington, North Carolina. So I'm so happy to be here. I was born and raised out of Winston. I moved to Wilmington about 4 years ago, and my colleague and I are here. But first of all, you all look freaking amazing.
Y'all really do.
I'm so glad to
This is
see
beautiful.
all of these Black-owned businesses. In honor, in the answer to the question, which was supporting Black-owned businesses, while I have a resource center that I'm working with a bank and I run that, the way that we grew that resource center from 0 small Black-owned businesses, 0, hear me now, that I was speaking to someone in here and they were like, Wilmington got Black-owned businesses? Listen, let me tell you, I have 416 in my database, unless Atiba yells out 417. 416 in our database, and we're reaching a goal this year of 500. Listen, you may not have a resource center here, like the one that I'm running, but you all have each other. And if you build community with one another, and again, to Harrison's point, first of all, no is a complete sentence. It's a complete sentence. You can say no, but you can also say no, let me find you another resource, because now you have built that relationship with someone else, whether you're in Greensboro, Winston-Salem, High Point, wherever the case may be. Okay.
Thank you all so much. I know that there are more questions in the room.